Good morning, Josselyne. We are so excited to have you on our show today. We love having like-minded people on our show. And when we heard that you talk about being unmessable with, we were like, yeah, we have to have her on our show. We're so excited to dive into this topic.
I'm thrilled to
Um,
be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And before we do dive in, one thing that we love to hear from our guests is, if you were to treat yourself to something special today with no financial constraints, what would it be or what would you do?
I would probably go to like a 3 or 4 star Michelin restaurant and get a really, really nice bottle of wine, which I wouldn't finish because my husband doesn't drink. So it'll just be me probably having half of that bottle of wine. But if money weren't an object, I wouldn't be worried about that. So
Well, that
Nice.
sounds wonderful. And we know you're in Paris right now, so you
that's
probably have
right.
your
So I
your
have,
choice of 3-star Michelin
I've got a
restaurants.
place around the corner I haven't been to. So that would be where I'd go.
That's so amazing. We don't even have one in Minneapolis. So
No. Oh,
I've never been to a
no.
Michelin star restaurant, but I will at some
We need to
point.
change that. I will send you a
Yeah.
list of places. Even the 1 stars are quite, and there are places that will get a star soon that you can grab now and
Uh-huh.
for much less price because they're so good. They're definitely going to get a star, but nobody knows about them yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's good to have that intel.
Yes.
So, Josselyne, could you provide us some insight into those pivotal moments and experiences that have influenced your career journey and how you came to coach people on with the art of being unmessable with?
Yeah, I can say the like Cliff Note versions of the pivotal moments. I would say
Yeah.
one was when I was 5 years old and I really loved singing and I would sing to everybody, like my stuffed animals and my dog and everything. And I remember my father was a painter and he painted, but he stopped painting and I noticed and I was sitting in a car with him and he was smoking a cigar. I remember, not like he ever really smoked cigars, but he was smoking a cigar. And I said, Dad, how come you stopped painting? And I'm 5, right? And he goes, well, you can't do your art as your career, like a just a comment. He wasn't like saying you can't do, he just was like, oh, you can't do your art as your career. And I in that moment decided that was the truth and
Mm.
lived into that future for about 15 years. So that became like a prison for me. Like I was like, oh, I guess I'm not going to be a singer. I'll have to be a business person or a lawyer or something. So that was pivotal. Then flash forward to my early 20s, I was a business person. I was producing commercials, running a company, just like I figured at 5. And I did a transformative workshop. And in that workshop, I saw that you can't do your art as your career wasn't the truth. It wasn't solid, but it was a belief that I had and that I had been proving and gathering evidence for 15 years. And you can find a lot of evidence for you can't do your art as your career, right?
Mm.
But you can also find evidence for the opposite if you look. I wasn't looking though. So in that moment of seeing that as a belief instead of the truth, it loosened its grip on me. And within 3 weeks, I got a record deal, which was completely a miracle as far as I'm concerned. But it wasn't woo woo. It was literally like, oh, that's not true. Let me start taking actions to be a singer. So it wasn't like I didn't do stuff. I did. I got a demo. I got a producer. I started introducing myself to people as a singer. And 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from this woman going, we heard you're a singer. I'm like, how is that possible? Like, I've only been introducing myself for 3 weeks, but she did. And she said, and we're starting this group and we need a fifth girl. And it's like female new kids on the block. Are you interested? And that was sort of the start of my fulfilling that childhood dream. So those were pretty pivotal. I could go into many, many other moments like, when I met my husband and when I had children and all those kind of things. But those I'd say set me on the path to developing people to be able to fulfill their dreams and develop what I call being unmessable with, which isn't about being tough. It's about being able to stay in action on your dreams and not get sucked into the world of reaction to what people say or circumstances or what you even say, being able to stay true to your vision.
I love that so much. And I recently wrote a book and it came out last August. And I have a very similar story where I was told that my voice, wasn't good. And I felt like my voice wasn't worth speaking and singing and whatever for many, many years. based on things that I heard from parents or teachers or whatever it was. So I can so relate to so much of what you're saying. And I
It's
think
amazing, right?
everybody has that thing, right? That like somebody told them, no matter what it is, and you take it in a way that isn't good for any of us.
Well, here's what I would say. It really isn't my father. It doesn't matter
Right.
what he said,
Yeah.
because he said a lot of things in my life I didn't listen to. Okay. But it's that I said it. And it's
Mhm.
what you say to yourself that sticks with you. Because if people call you a pineapple, you're not like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm a pineapple.
Yeah.
Because you have no concern about being a pineapple, you know. But if you say to yourself, oh, you're a pineapple, you start worrying about being prickly and having to take off the top. I mean, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. This pineapple analogy is falling apart quickly, but
Well, it's so true. And it's funny because I just started listening to this book, The Untethered Soul, and it's about like all the stories in your head, you know, and
Yeah.
like your conscious mind and how we observe these thoughts and stories. And we just need to let it go and like unblock the energy in your heart. And so this is all very interwoven with what sort of I'm working on right now, which is why I find it, you know, so fascinating. So you talk about, you know, being unmessable with, which is your
yes.
brand and everything. So
I know. I love that word so much. I just got the trademark registration on it.
I noticed
I
that.
was like, that's all now on my website is all that little tiny R, you know?
Well, congrats. That's a big deal because Marnie and I did the same thing with our podcast. And yeah,
It was a
it's
long
exciting.
process.
Yeah, it took like a year and a half. I forgot about it at one point. I was
And
like,
then you have
whatever.
to defend it, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So what are some key tips to being unmessable with?
Well, the first thing when I work with people, whether it's one-on-one or in groups or courses, the first thing I ask people is, what's your vision? And a lot of people aren't really clear on their vision. And you can't fulfill your vision if you're not clear on it. So it depends. If somebody's clear about it, then I would ask, okay, so now what has to happen to fulfill that vision? And then I'd ask, okay, what's going to mess with you? What's going to stop you? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about that.
Yeah,
So
sure.
when I think about what's my vision, I have a vision in many different buckets. Like I
Yep.
have a career vision, I have a relationship vision, I have a, you know, fun things I want to do vision. Like, so
Absolutely.
where do you start when you're just looking at that one question? What's your vision? Like, is it one thing? Is it many things? How do you
Well,
address
it depends. It's all, depends on the context of the conversation. If somebody comes to me for one-on-one coaching, they usually have something in mind that they are dealing with. So we'll start there. But sometimes, people don't know. They're like, well, in what area? Well, let's start with your family, you know, or with your business, or with your well-being, or with your dreams that are like my dream of being a singer, it was untapped because I thought it wasn't possible. What is it that you really, really want that hasn't happened yet? That's one way of accessing it. Another, I mean, there's so many different ways. This is kind of like, you have a mansion with like 50 doors. You just have to go in one door to get in the mansion. So my analogies are getting better than the pineapple one, but yes, so that's sort of.
So it almost seems like what you're saying too is maybe once you untap that one vision, like Marnie said, she has a lot of different visions, then the possibility, I think like your energy and what you're putting out there in your mindset shifts, that then these other doors just pop open as well with less effort than maybe that first block that you had.
Well, what I've found is that what messes with you in one area messes with you in other areas. So it doesn't really matter where we start.
Right.
That's kind of what I've discovered and working with people over the last 35 years is, give me anything. Okay, we'll get to what messes with you very quickly.
Mhm.
Because and those things that mess with people are pretty much in the family of, limiting beliefs, self-doubt, not doing what you say you're going to do. Some shoulds, shouldn'ts, money messes with people, time messes. This is like the hit parade of messable with factors.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not really critical to have something specific. You can enter through any door, any area of your life where you want something.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And so you started to tell us, like Stephanie had asked, what are some key tips? And I know we got to number one, what's your vision? And then we got off track. So
Oh yeah. Well, but then I would say, okay, well, you give me something. Let's actually do it, because otherwise it's too hypothetical. You know what I mean? It's not
Okay.
great to coach somebody in a hypothetical game. Let's get something real. What do you want?
So Stephanie and I have been doing the podcast for 4 years, and we love it. We're passionate about it, and we really want to take it to the next level. And we want to build a community. Like right now, we have a small community. We want a larger community. We have a pretty decent presence, I would say, in Minneapolis. We would like to expand our reach. And we also, don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to throw at this. So
right.
bearing that in
Well,
mind.
that's a consideration. That's not your vision. So
yes, correct.
Yeah. So, and again, those kinds of things are some of the things that mess with people fulfilling on their vision is they have a consideration. Well, I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough followers, or I don't have enough of something, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm not old enough. I'm not young enough. I'm not whatever enough.
Yeah.
So that's a big one that messes with people. So what I would do right now with you is, first of all, I would get clear about, well, what do you mean by expand your reach? What do you mean by, we want to expand our base or what does that look like? Specific.
We want to be famous. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Totally
But what would that look like? I mean, listen,
I'm
famous
kidding.
for a lot
Almost
of
famous, Marnie. Almost famous.
But like, what if you look a year from now, if you could create it any way you wanted to, what would it look like? Would it look like X thousands of downloads a month? Would it look like what is the measure of what you're calling expanded reach? Because if you say, I want to expand my reach, and you expand your reach by 15 people, you did expand your reach. But if you're not specific, you're not going to know if you're winning the game that you're in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what do you really want?
I think it's increased number of downloads so that we have more
how
sponsors.
many? More is not a real number, so let's get specific.
I think the first month an episode is out, if we could have 1,000 downloads per episode, that would be amazing.
Okay,
right?
So in the first month,
I would even say 1,500, Marnie.
Okay, 1,500.
Okay, so 15. And what do you do now? How many downloads now in the first month?
It depends. It's so variable based on the guest. I mean, we've had 1,000 downloads in a month with a few big guests, so.
But consistently, it would be nice.
We would like, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you tracking the downloads now?
We do.
It does it.
In our program, it tracks it.
Okay. So you would have to, first of all, know where you are. So this is like in any game. If you're going to create a goal, this is not really a vision. This is more a goal, which is fine. You have goals. You have to know where you are now. If you have a goal about your money, well, I want to have more money. Well, how much do you have now? And then how much do you want to build it this year? So same thing with weight or blood pressure or anything. If you don't have a metric and you don't know where you are, you can't impact reality without the stats around reality. So this is a statistical thing. Yeah.
So maybe not even looking at a numbers goal. Maybe we look at building community. Like right now, I'll hear things. I'll be out walking my dog, or I'll run into someone and they'll share something with me about what they listened to on the podcast. But I would love to hear from our listeners, on our Facebook page or on our Instagram page, or reaching out to us on email and saying, hey, we would love to hear from this guest, or we would love for you guys to talk about X, Y, and Z, having more engagement within our community.
Once again, I would say you got to come up with metrics. So how many emails do you currently get? How many emails do you want to get? Because you're going to design your initiatives and your actions based on what you're measuring. You move what you measure. If you're not measuring something, you're in crazy town, because you're just like basing it on your feelings. Well, I feel like our community expanded because somebody said something to me today. I mean, it's like, no, you got to have actual reality, just like you would be tracking your cholesterol or your weight or your, money. So without a specific goal, let's just take it a separate tact at this. Let's say you did that. Let's say you expanded your community and you had all these downloads. Then what would be available to you that isn't available now?
Well, I think part of it is with the community growth, it's engagement, but then we do run programs where we would make money. So then
Okay.
this drives the financial, increasing our financial position
So let's say you're
and
making more money. Now what's
making more money.
possible?
And then we would have more sponsorship opportunity. I mean, we've had sponsors and they've been great, but we would have more opportunities and maybe even could increase those rates that we're currently charging our sponsors.
Okay, but let's say all that's happening, right?
Okay.
Those are all vehicles. That's not really your vision. So let's say you have more money, you have more sponsors, you have more community, more. Now what? What's present in your life that isn't available?
I mean, maybe we're doing more live events
Okay.
for our communities. Maybe we're traveling and doing live events. Maybe we're talking to companies, empowering women, planning retreats. I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah, there's lots of things you'd be doing, but my question is different. What would be present in your life that isn't present? It's a spatial conversation, like the experience of life. That's where vision lies. Vision is contextual. It's more of a spatial conversation. Goals are in reality, we'd be doing this many tours and speaking engagements and all that kind of stuff, but that's not your vision. Like, why are you doing all of that? What becomes available or present or
I think for me, at least, it's like truly having an impact on people's lives, transforming people's lives for the long term, like getting people to get out of their head, get more in tune with what they want. So like really like transforming people's lives, mind, body, spirit, not just in the physical, not just through food, but through mindset, all the things that we share on this podcast.
Yeah, the whole package, right?
Yeah.
And even just getting people to think outside of their box is one of our goals.
So when people think outside of their box, then what becomes available to them like an experience?
Right. Exactly.
No, I'm asking.
Oh, when they think outside of their box, it expands their mind and maybe they try something new that they hadn't considered. And I have found that when that happens and you do try something new and maybe you step into a fear or you step outside your box, your world expands in many different ways. And so I guess to answer your question, maybe we're trying to expand our world, our listeners' worlds more and our own.
So let's say expansion is the vision. It's not just expanding your community. It's not just expanding your numbers. It's expanding people's minds. It's expanding people's opportunities, their lives. So expansion would be what I would use as a first cut of the vision. Now that becomes a context, okay? Now you're going to have all sorts of goals inside of that in terms of numbers, but why you have those goals is because what you're really about is expansion. So our mission is to provide pathways for people to expand in every area of their life. You know?
Now, I think that could help heal like that. That's what would then, once they expand, and their mind expands to the possibilities and they're open to new opportunities and new modalities, then they can start to heal. People that are physically, symptomatic, they can heal, but then people can start to heal at like an emotional level too.
But let's say they're healed.
Okay. It doesn't even need to be healing.
Yeah, because healing is fixing.
Yeah, I don't think it needs, like, even thinking about Stephanie and I are doing an event in the fall where we're climbing a mountain, and it's a pretty aggressive event, I would say. And we have been talking about it a lot on our podcast, on the show. And I think that it has opened a lot of our listeners' minds to something that they've never thought about, they've never considered. And I guess for me, that feels really good. It's almost like we're trailblazers in some ways for our audience.
Well, we're influencing.
You said impact earlier. So let's take impact. Influence maybe, but that's more of a doing. Impact is kind of like a presence, like, wow, I'm impacted by what just was said or what I just experienced, right? So if we take expansion and impact as the game. So when I say game, I mean like the why or the purpose or the context of what you're doing, because context shapes everything. It's like the lens that you look at everything through. So if I say, in the context body part, what is this? You'll say finger. And if you say in the context direction, what is it? You're going to say up. And if I say in the context number, what is it? You'll say 1. So it's the same exact content, but the context shapes how you see it and what becomes available and what actions you take. So if you create expansion and impact as the context of what you're doing with your show, with your community, with your with everything that you're doing, then that will hone your actions to be fulfilling on that. But it isn't going to be once you have the 1,500 downloads that you can fulfill on expansion and impact. When can you fulfill on expansion and impact? Right now. And right now. And right now.
Yeah, this is very powerful because I think, Marnie, we've been thinking about it the wrong way.
Yeah,
we've been so in the tactics of it and the metrics without, like, if we're not exuberating the vision that we want and we feel inside of each of us, then how do our listeners feel that?
They can't. And what ends up happening for people like you, like anybody, is they have like a vision, but they quickly shift over into management mode. Management is all in the realm of reaction, not creation. So now you're managing metrics and you're managing actions and there's no magic in management. Vision is where the magic is, where the creation is. So all the work I do with people, when I call the art of being unmessable with, is being able to shift from the world of reaction and management and survival to this world of creation and vision and dreams and fulfillment, and have your actions be consistent with that world versus a reaction to how much money you have in the bank or how many downloads you had this week or or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Most people, especially high-powered people, are really good reactors. They put out fires, they deal with whatever's happening, they can react really well. But that's different than creation. That's a different muscle. So all the work I do is getting that muscle of creation going so that you're hanging in that world versus the world of being messable with, which is the world of reaction.
So how do you develop that muscle? Like, how do you change your, I don't know if you'd call it a mindset or the way that you do things? If, I heard you mention on somewhere that like 99% of people live in that reaction space.
Well, they don't fulfill their dreams. The statistics are 98% of people die with their dreams intact.
That's so sad.
It's so sad. Well, why am I doing what I'm doing? I could be retired right now. I'm like, no, I'm going to keep doing this because it's not okay with me, because it's possible that people can fulfill their dreams. It's possible, but you need to develop a muscle of creation and acting from that space. So one way I always say, get a coach. As you're both coaches. So coaching allows somebody to see what you can't see so you can accomplish what you want to accomplish, because you can't see everything. I have 3 coaches because I can't see everything, and there are things I want and I have reasons or considerations that are in the way. So I need somebody to pull me out of the soup, so to speak, right? So I would get a coach if somebody's really committed to fulfilling on something they haven't fulfilled on in any area of life. If you want to fulfill on something with money, get a money coach. If you want to fulfill on something with your well-being, get a well-being coach, whatever it is, right? The other thing is that once you get clear about your vision, like you guys just did, right? Then you have to relook at everything you're doing and start to weed stuff out. Like, is this consistent with what I'm creating? Or is this, I'm just doing this to survive, or I'm just doing this because it's in my schedule, because I've always done it. It's like you have to be disciplined to, and people hate that word, but it really does take discipline to constantly be looking, like on a daily basis. Okay, what am I creating? And are my actions in alignment with that? Like, is this action going to fulfill on that outcome? Or, when you find yourself just going through tasks, it's like, okay, hold on. What is the context here that I created? Because you have the say over the color of the lens you're wearing. So it's like, okay, now let me remind myself what I'm building here. Okay, I'm building impact and expansion. So now what do I need to do to fulfill on that? So it's a constant asking and planning. So, you do backwards engineering from a year out to 9 months to 6 months to 3 months to 2 months to 1 month to 1 week. And every week you're relooking at the week ahead and making sure that your plan doesn't need to be tweaked, because any plan you create is going to be etched in sand, not stone, because things happen. Right. And you might exceed your target one week and not exceed it the next week, and you have to adjust your numbers and all of that kind of stuff. But it's as you're doing that, what I've discovered in working with like a few 100,000 people, I feel so old, but in working with people, what happens is when they have a plan like that, what messes with them shows up very quickly.
So I have a question about that. Just going back to even thinking about you going after your singing dream. Like obviously you had talent, right? But or maybe not.
I represent a lot of people that have a lot more talent than I did. I mean, I did have talent, but I'm
what if someone has a vision that, like, would you say every vision is attainable, or are there some visions that like are not very realistic for that particular person? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do know exactly what you're saying. And let's go back to vision of impact and expansion is attainable by anybody. Having a podcast with 1,500, that's a vehicle. That's not a vision.
But like, what if someone says, "Oh, I want $5 billion." Like, you know what I mean?
But that's a goal. That's not a vision. That's why I kept asking you then what would be present, what would be available, what would be the experience of life? Because the experience of expansion and impact, you could have that at Starbucks. You don't have to have a show to have that. You can impact somebody on the street. You can impact somebody in your family. You can create the presence of expansion and the experience of expansion with your 5-year-old. So the work I do with people to clarify their vision has it be accessible right now, no matter what the circumstance.
I like that a lot.
Isn't that great? Because it's not circumstantially based.
And it's not so out there and feel,
And it's not so someday. So it's not like, well, I want to win an Academy Award. Okay, but why? What is that going to give you as an experience of life? Fulfillment. You could have fulfillment right now. You don't have to wait.
Yeah. And so once you have that vision and you're coming up with the goals, if you will, like you said, you can have expansion and impact in Starbucks, right? As an example. So then if you have these kind of small wins, if you will, then do they just sort of start to build off of each other? Because then you figured out those unmessable, the blocks, if you will.
Well, if you have a goal, how I work with people is I have them say, what they want to accomplish in X amount of time, right? And then we work on that and what shows up. Like if somebody has a goal to double their business, I have a mastery program that's a year long with entrepreneurs who want to double their business. And in that group, that's the ticket in, is that you want to double your business or reduce your workload in half while keeping or raising your income, right? So we'll have metrics, and then they might have in, 1 week, their promises are to do X, Y, Z, to hire a virtual assistant or to, offload certain things off their schedule or whatever, their plate, right? And then when I speak to them the next time, if they didn't do those things, if they did those things, they're going to have great results, right? If they didn't do those things, it's not a problem. I'll just say, great, what got in the way? Because now I'll be able to see what messes with them. It's like, well, I don't trust that they're going to do it the right way. Okay, well, trust is something we can dive into to shift the mindset around. That's what coaching, can provide. People don't need me to hold them to account for their promises. It's what I see in the way or what's next in building the muscle if they do accomplish what they said they were going to accomplish. So it's never a problem if somebody doesn't accomplish what they said they were going to accomplish, because it'll just illuminate a blind spot of something that became more important than what they were creating, and if, survival is more important than your word, then you're going to be messable with.
I can totally see how that would start to unpack those layers and the limiting beliefs. Like you need to have some of those situations where you don't perform on your goal.
Exactly. And
otherwise, why are you even there? Yeah, then you don't need the coaching, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, the coaching helps hone in on what the measures are and what the actions are. But at the same time, it's kind of like there's nobody, and I work with really successful people and they all have stuff that messes with them. It doesn't matter. And if it doesn't mess with them in business, it messes with them with their wife or girlfriend, whatever, or boyfriend or whatever. children. Oh, children mess with people. Oh my God, their children mess with them so much. People are afraid of their children. It's hysterical.
Well, and I know we're very focused, this conversation and coaching Marty and I has been on our business, but what you do impacts every area of people's lives, right?
Every area,
how can you provide an example or share how something totally different than
like fight-free families, maybe?
Like, yes, that would be amazing.
I know you talk about that.
Yeah, well, we don't. I mean, I'm with my husband 30 years ago, we met, and we have had 5 fights, although he says it's 4. But I'm not going to argue with him. I'm like, whatever, 4 or 5. Now, why is that? Because we're not in the game of being right is more important than being happy.
I love that.
Yeah.
We have created a different context, like you created that vision of impact and expansion. Our creation is peace and freedom and communication and partnership, and we act consistent with that. And have we had absolutely. Our first one, I'll never forget it, was when I was pregnant with our first child. And he said, I don't think you should have an epidural. And I went nuts. So 4 of those 5 fights were when I was pregnant with somebody. So I will just kind of say in those moments,
we'll chalk it up to that.
Yeah. Well, in those moments, I didn't have power with my word. My hormones had more power than my words. So, I definitely became about surviving and being right. So yeah, it just depends on what game you're playing. And with my mother, I gave up like 25 years ago, I gave up the right to be right with my mother. It's not worth it.
Huh.
Like I could find reasons to be right with anybody, but what for? There's no cheese down that tunnel.
So what if you have a strong belief about something though, and someone that's important in your life is really throwing that off, or really,
well, like what? Tell me what's happening and I'll deal with it right now. Again, hypothetical games. It's not really.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, let me think about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it could be a political thing, not getting into the politics of the world right now, but
absolutely,
it could be that I have a belief about something and a friend has a very different belief. And
okay, but what's the problem with that? What's the problem with somebody having a different belief than you?
Well, I guess if it's going to cause harm to somebody, then I have a problem.
Their belief is going to cause harm?
Well, it could with their words. Yeah.
Like what though? I mean, you see, the thing is you're reacting to something that's somebody saying, well, I believe in whatever, gun control or not gun control or whatever they say, right? You see it differently, which of course you do. You're a different human being. You're going to see things differently. I mean, if you were in this room with me, we would see this room completely differently. Based on our perspective. Perspective isn't the truth. It's just, I mean, have you ever believed in something and then changed your belief?
Yeah,
in your life? Absolutely, all the time, right? I mean, at one point, Santa Claus was real for, I'm sorry if I'm blowing it for your listeners, but there is no Santa Claus, not real. I mean, there's a real Santa Claus at the mall, but that's not really Santa Claus. So, beliefs are nothing more than that. Now, as a human race, our beliefs become all important, and that's why we have war. Every war you can track back to, my belief is more real than yours, more valid than yours. So now you're just going to have war with that person in your life because you're going to stand in that your belief is more real than theirs or more valid than theirs. I'm clear. People have different beliefs. One of my best friends has like the complete polar opposite political beliefs than me. I just let her have her beliefs. I don't have to change her beliefs, and I don't have to get her to believe what I believe. It's irrelevant. She is not her beliefs. And if you relate to yourself or other people like who you are is your belief, then you will defend it to the death, because whatever you identify with has power in your life. Many people identify with their feelings. They're like, I'm sad. I'm, whatever those feelings are. Instead of, I'm experiencing sadness right now. I'm not sad. It's not like you're going to find a sad gene in me if you cut me open. I have sadness right now. I am being sad right now. It's not a problem to be sad. But if you stick yourself with something, just like a belief, then you're like in a prison. So if you can start to dismantle what you're identifying with that has you hookable when people have an opposite view or belief or something like that. Like, what is it that I am considering to be threatened right now? Because somehow you're threatened by their belief. Making sense, or am I
Yes,
pissing
and I
you
can
off?
like feel myself, like when you have those conversations like Marnie's referring to, we start to like our blood boils a little bit and we
Yes.
can feel it physically, that sensation, what's making us uncomfortable. And we want to like argue that our belief is, like you said,
more real or more
yeah,
right.
more valid. Like our belief is more valid. But I liked how you framed it back to like, but that's not who we are. Like when someone asks the question, who are you? You don't say I'm sad or I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. No, that's not who we are, right?
No, it's a belief you have or something you practice or something you feel or whatever. I mean, but the point is what you said is brilliant, right, Stephanie? Because it does happen physically. You have a physical reaction, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
When you're being messable with, and I work with people to find out what I call their red flag, which is the physical symptom that you are going down the road of reaction or the road of being messable with. So when people identify what it is, like what's yours, either one of you, just like what happens to you in your body when you're being.
I mean, I used to get like I don't get this anymore because I've done a lot of work, but I used to get a rash like all over my neck.
Yep.
And sometimes I lose my words almost like I can't find the words to say what I want to say.
And now that the rash thing isn't happening, what happens now when you're in one of those moments where it's like, ugh?
I mean, I've done so much work in that area that I feel like I'm not in those moments as much anymore.
I would call BS on that because you just brought up the political thing. So if somebody is coming at you with a political belief.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. I wasn't thinking about the political thing.
Yeah. Well, it's anything that messes with you.
So a lot of times, I mean, if someone's going to tell me they want me dead, then I'm going to shut down. And
but what does that look like in your body? So do you get a tight chest? Do you have like a tight throat?
I'll like have to breathe. I'll have to like take some deep breaths and just I'll just shut down and quiet down. And
when you say shut down, how does that show up physically though? Withdraw is a little bit more conceptual, like an explanation of something physical. It could be
nausea.
Nausea, perfect. That's like a physical symptom, right? So you get nauseous. You maybe something in your throat. You had said earlier, like you lose your words,
it's like I will take deep breaths because it'll be hard to like breathe.
Yeah, so it's like shortness of breath, nausea. That would be the signal. So what I would coach you in is say, okay, don't worry about looking for what messes with you. Just look for that physical symptom. Because when that physical symptom happens, you know you are about to or just went down the road of reaction and being messable with. So then the question is, how do you hack it? How do you reroute your brain? Because that's all your brain. That's all the amygdala hijacking you. You're in fight, flight, freeze, whatever, right there. So how do you interrupt that neuronal pattern is something physical. So you would design, and you can do it right now if you want, design something that you would do that would interrupt the minute you see that nausea or that, what was the second thing you said? Nausea and
shortness of breath.
Shortness of breath. What could you do actively that would interrupt what was happening? The breathing, I don't think is a good one for you because you're already doing that to survive. So it's coming from the same place.
Okay. So, I mean, removing myself from this situation.
Okay, but sometimes you can't, you're in a meeting or, so what could you physically do if you were on a Zoom call with somebody who was doing that? I mean, you're not going to just hang up on them most likely, or you're at Thanksgiving dinner and you're not going to just be like, see ya. So what could you physically do? And it doesn't have to be complex. It could just be, it's you're designing it and it's not something you normally do. So it's like a interruption.
So like, if I can speak, I guess I would say I'm not comfortable with this conversation, or I'd rather not have this conversation.
Yeah,
or
that's
can
you
we
being
agree to
messable with.
disagree? I don't know.
Yeah,
none
of that. Okay, good. Well, we'll work together. We'll do it right now. So if you do any of that, that's all your reaction. See, if you're unmessable with, you can be with anybody's belief. It doesn't mess with you. You can allow them to have their belief. You don't have to get all messed up and take yourself away from the toxic people. And, it's like, because then you're eliminating people from your life rather than developing yourself to be able to be with anyone. So one thing you could do, I mean, I'm just offering, you can come up with anything. You could like you could go like this with your fingers, because that's like a weird thing. You're not going to do that normally. So that would be like, I'm consciously doing it. Yeah, exactly. You could go like this. You could stretch,
break out in a little dance.
You could, or you could, like, I have people that they stand up if they're sitting down, or they sit down if they're standing up. So they're changing their physical position.
Interesting.
But all that does is hack the brain pattern. So now you're at what I would call neutral. Some people do tapping, they'll go like this or something like that. Whatever it is,
what I was thinking.
It just needs to be pre-created. So you're consciously, deliberately doing it to interrupt the nausea and the shortness of breath. So then you're kind of in the middle, you're neutral. But neutral doesn't last, because you have all those beliefs and brain patterns that are going to pull you back to being right and telling them to shut up or leave or whatever all that is. So you have to pre-create a new space to go to, right? So that would be a pre-created context, like you did with your vision. It would be like, okay, what's my vision for this relationship, or what's my vision for life? You could use impact and expansion if you wanted to. Yeah, you totally could. So then in that moment, if expansion is the vision and it's pre-created, because you can't in the heat of the moment come up with one of these things. I'm telling you, it is just too hard, right? So you have to have it already. Okay, expansion. What action could I take right now that would fulfill on, express, or forward that vision? So in the case of somebody with their beliefs and everything, what I would recommend is I would go, okay, I'm going to now expand my view of this subject and listen to what they're saying. I don't have to take it on like a belief, but I'm going to relax and actually expand what I see about this. Try on what they're saying. Again, you don't have to go live with them or join that political party or whatever, but you're listening, Or you could come up with 10 different actions, depending on the thing. You could say, I so appreciate you sharing your view. I know we don't share the same view, but I really appreciate you sharing it with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and then the whole thing is diffused. So it takes practice.
Yeah.
Because everything in your body is going to tell you to go down that road of get out of this conversation. This is not okay. What they're saying is dangerous, Now, if somebody's like physically coming at you, then run.
Right.
Okay.
Let's assume that's not happening. But yes, I like what you said, like, instead of just removing yourself from the situation, because then you're limiting your life's experiences, who you can come into contact. You're letting the other people control you and your thoughts and how you react and you respond. And ultimately that builds up in ourselves. Even if
it reduces the amount of space you have to express yourself and be.
Right. Then you're not truly in your essence if you can't be comfortable in these situations. And by comfortable, I don't mean desirable. You don't want to be in these situations.
But if you can coexist. You could be. And not that you have to be, not that you want to be, but you could be.
Yeah.
And you would be okay. It wouldn't be like I have to survive this weekend with my mother-in-law, just like, no, you could actually just be with your mother-in-law and not have it be like a drama.
That's very well timed, Marnie.
Yeah, my in-laws just came in last night, actually.
There you go. It's like you're speaking to me through the Zoom lines.
That's really funny.
But you could create a context for this weekend, family and joy and whatever, appreciation. I mean, you could create a game for anything.
Right. No, I love that. I really love the idea of the vision. That's
not
very
the
powerful.
Vehicle. Don't focus on the vehicle. Always return to the vision, which is the same thing in that moment of hacking your messable with moment and going to your vision. It's all like the vision is where it ends and starts.
I think this is really powerful. And And I really see the benefit for anybody in doing this type of coaching, like Stephanie mentioned, in any area. This is not just business, it's
No, definitely not just.
relationships and,
Mm-mm.
you know, whatever it is that you are thinking about, right?
Yeah, totally. It's, you know, it's like, it's your life.
Yeah.
It is.
And it's funny because, you know, Stephanie and I are both health and wellness coaches. Like we do deal with mind, body, spirit, but when you're in the hot seat yourself, it's a whole different ball game, right?
You got to let go. It's like, you know, it's like letting go of those beliefs or letting go of those things you know to be true or whatever it is. And we can't see what we can't see. I mean, I thank God for all my coaches. I was just on the phone with one of my coaches right before this call, and I was like, okay, this is messing with me. I said, I am not seeing my way through this. Anytime I experience things going slow, I know there's something in the way that I'm not seeing, because things move like really flow in my life. And when they're not, it's me.
Mm-hmm.
We all get in our own way from being in that flow state. So, oh my gosh, Josselyne, so much. I feel like we could have you on again to dive more into this, but
I'd love to anytime.
as we start to wrap up this conversation, you know, our listeners love to walk away from each episode with a couple of practical tips or just suggestions that they can immediately implement into their life. And you've already shared so much, but what would be like one or two of your top things to start to become unmessable with?
I would start, you know, as Marnie said, with the vision. I would really get clear about that. If you're not clear about your vision, I have a whole process on my website that you can do called the Dream Source Discovery Process. It's a 5-day process. You could do that. You could start with one of my free offerings called the Promise Game, which has you create a promise each day. Like, I promise to make 5 people smile today. And the intention is to be able to create joy that day. So you're out there with an intention, with a word, and then you fulfill on that word, and a word, and then you fulfill on that word. So that's a great way to start practicing creation. And that's at giftfromjoss.com. But I have so many resources on the website. You could listen to my podcast, Be Unmessable With the podcast, which recently launched. And, you know, there's just a lot of ways you could start. But I would always start with, what do you really want? You know, and a lot of people don't answer that question for themselves because they're so busy dealing with what life is throwing at them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that
Yep.
they don't look up and out to the world of vision. And then, okay, what needs to happen for that thing to be fulfilled?
I love that so much. And it's funny because I do that with my own clients.
Absolutely, but you can't coach yourself. I can't coach myself either. It's
yeah.
crazy.
So, where is the best place? What's the best way for the listeners to get in touch with you? I know you have a website. You mentioned your offers.
So beunmessablewith.com is the website. That's the best way to, and my email is on there. So you can email me, you can peruse all the freebies, you can look at the other ways to work with me. You can listen to the podcast everywhere where you get podcasts, and I'm Be Unmessable With it at Instagram. So it's pretty consistent.
Awesome.
Awesome. And we'll link all that up in the show notes
Great.
as well.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Well, you're not off the hook yet. So one final
Okay.
question that we ask all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
I think if I look just from right now, it's about defining what well is for each person. And each person, I think it's different. So, you know, like your first question of me is, what would I do to take care, you know, like to really treat myself, having the 4-star meal, like that's an example of living well. But also just sitting on a bench and having a cup of coffee is an example of living well. So
Especially
really,
in Paris.
exactly. That's like on my daily list, right? Or doing hot yoga is a way that I incorporate into my version of living well. So I think it's personal. And for me, a lot of it has to do with freedom and family and, you know, nurturing the people around me and making an impact in the world. You know, that's been my life for a really long time. My life's been about making a difference. And, you know, when people live their dreams, that makes me cry. That makes me cry with joy. You know, there's nothing better
Mm-hmm.
than
That's
people
wonderful.
fulfilling on their vision. Yeah.
And I know we didn't even get into this, but you have a lot of philanthropic work that you've done and giving back. So that ties all right into how you live well.
Yeah,
Oh.
if you're, it's like, I don't even think of it as giving back. It's more like I get more out of that work than I put into it, for sure. It's like, the joy of making a difference. It's your vision. It's impact. That's what it is, right? You, I'm sure, can relate to it. There's nothing better than that.
No.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. We so appreciate you coming on our show today, and we definitely will look forward to more conversations with you in the future.
Absolutely. I look forward to it too. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Have a wonderful day. Thanks,
You
Josselyne.
too.